Hi, it's Laura again, and I'm here with your second part of the trifocal lens, specifically presenting the family and group part of the lens. We've looked at the personal part of the lens, and the second part of the trifocal is family and groups. So this lens tends to look specifically at families and other groups, the interpersonal situations that we end up under. Many of us do work in groups in our jobs. So it's concerned with more or less the internal functioning of the group. So what groups pay attention to, how we behave in groups. Some elements that are included in the family or group lens include that I'll be talking about also are stages of development. So many of you have heard of the Bruce Tuckman stages of development for groups. We'll talk a little bit about boundary permeability. This came up in our structural lens, so groups tend to have boundaries as well. We're going to talk a little bit about in-group and out-group dynamics, what happens. We're going to talk about task and maintenance functions and what they look like in groups, and then also trust and social capital. So several elements to be included here. But I want to start by talking a little bit about the field of group dynamics. I think one of my favorite authors, who has also not been around for a long time, is Kurt. It looks like it's Lewin, L-E-W-I-N, but pronounced Kurt Lewin, because I believe it was German. So he's the founder of group dynamics, which is that its study and focuses on the nature of groups. So specifically the idea that we are all hardwired to belong and to something bigger than just ourselves. So how is it that those attitudes play out? What is recognized or unrecognized in them, and then the influence of a group that it has on specific people. So Lewin looked at group dynamics because he wanted to describe the way groups and individuals act and react in changing circumstances, because they don't tend to stay the same very much. Two of the people I want to talk about real quickly that's not up here. One of them that wrote about and studied group dynamics, one of them is William Schultz. So he tended to look at interpersonal relations in groups from the perspective of three dimensions. He looked at inclusion in groups, control in groups, and affection. So how does a group go about resolving issues as each of these come up? Finally, I want to talk a little bit about Wilfred Bion, B-I-O-N. He studied group dynamics from a psychoanalytic perspective. So many of his findings reported in experiences in groups. He is also known as one of the founders of the Tavistock Institute. And so what he studied, so the Tavistock Institute and Bion are basically two in one, if you want to look up the Tavistock Institute. So something that's not talked a lot about, and I believe this comes from Bion, is the idea that in groups we have task and maintenance functions in terms of, in addition to setting boundaries. So each group is set up, large group, small group, or an organization, if you will. We have a task that we need to get done. So that task we're often looking at in groups to constantly improve it, and we also want to do the task efficiently and with high quality. In addition to just completing a task, we also have three other areas to look at, and these are all maintenance functions. So we need to look at effective decisions, if we're able to do that as a group, and not only able to make decisions, but to implement those decisions are also known as maintenance activities. The individual responses to a group. So how does the group protect itself from a harmful individual or individuals, and how do they also include others? So how is it that the group goes about caring about each other and treats one another with dignity? The fourth area, again a maintenance function, is the ability of the group to solve complex problems. How when internal conflicts come up, how does the group go about solving those problems? The whole idea around task and maintenance functions is that they both these areas need to be done. However, for a healthy group, it's considered that 75% of the time needs to be spent on completing the task, and 25% of the time on maintaining that group's boundaries and that group's functioning. Here's what it looks like. So you can imagine if the group spends too much time on maintenance, it doesn't get enough tasks done. In groups that are all task-driven, people aren't taken care of. There's decisions that have not been made, and so the grind of work tends to wear people down. So the recommendation is to spend 70 to 80% of time on task, and then probably about 20, 25, sometimes 30%, depending on the maintenance of a group. Get too far out of those boundaries and you have something that's pretty unhealthy. Some of you, in terms of looking at groups and how they function or interact, so take a while, if you're in your group sometime, to look at how people communicate with one another. This is really, I think, interesting to do in a group that you're a part of, but also as an outsider to watch, if you have that ability to watch the group's interactions. So to look at specifically some of these things: the frequency, the duration, and the content of verbal communication that's spoken by each individual. Who communicates to whom? So some people tend to hypothetically look at certain people when they're communicating, or it may just be that they're not just looking at them, they are just communicating with that person. Who interrupts whom? If that happens, who triggers specific responses in other people? So these are called triggering patterns. Are there certain elements of communication style that people carry out, and how do others react to that style? And then the nonverbal communication. So what sorts of gestures are made, the body posture, if you can see facial expressions, and what do these tell us in terms of group dynamics and communication? And also, most of these are maintenance and management functions in groups when we're observing this kind of communication. Forgot to mention this in the first recorded presentation, but I hope that you're thinking not only how does this look like where I work and my family, but also what do these things look like in the office? Many of you are familiar with Bruce Tuckman's stages of development. So he said that this is an ideal group decision-making process in terms of how groups get together and work productively. So he said that groups get together, they form, then they move on to storming, and then norming and performing. So the forming often looks like we're just getting together with others, and we pretend to get on or get along with others during this stage. Oftentimes, many groups actually don't get beyond this stage of development. So it looks like maybe a class that you're a part of, and you go in and meet, and everybody's kind to one another, and you go away the next week, you come in and meet, and everybody's kind to one another. So you never really get to that storming phase, which is kind of letting down the politeness barriers and getting to the issues, even if tempers flare up. So people start communicating their real feelings and ideas. Norming is the idea that we're getting used to one another, and we're developing a sense of trust and productivity. And then finally, performing is the idea of a well-oiled group, that they work together for a common goal and are highly efficient at doing it as what they're set out to do. So here's another way of looking at Tuckman. And by the way, many people have added to the end of it, forming, norming, storming, performing, and then, it's kind of the ending. I can't remember what it's called now. My apologies. So forming, team gets acquainted, establishes ground rules. Formalities are preserved until these are no longer, these are strangers, basically, every time. We don't know very much about them. Storming, communicate feelings, ideas. They resist maybe some controls that are put together or put in place by the group. Norming, people feel like they're a part of a team. I liked these pictures as well down below. And they realize that everybody's working to achieve a greater goal. And then performing, the team works open and trusting atmosphere. Flexibility tends to be the key, and hierarchy is of little importance. When this is applied to actual groups, hardly any of them actually get to the norming and performing stage. Many groups get caught in forming, and many groups get caught in storming and are not able to make it to the point of trusting one another. So another concept that I talked about in the personal part of the trifocal lens was the Johari window. So just as in individuals as people, groups can be looked at as having a Johari window. So you can look at a group that has a large open or free area. They know one another really well. They know what others' strengths or weaknesses are. That there's not a lot of hidden information. People don't hold back their skills and what it is that others need to know. They know a lot about how they operate as a group, and so they observe, they're open, they're trusting of one another. And so you can imagine if groups are blind, they don't know anything about one another, they don't really know how they're doing as a group. If they're a hidden area, that group just doesn't share anything, so they don't know what others can, how they can help. So you can just think of the Johari window in these terms as well. I thought I took this one out, so I want to look at French and Raven's 5 forms of power. So the coercive power have the ability to punish for noncompliance, reward to compensate. Expert power is based on superior skill and knowledge. Referent is perceived attractiveness, worthiness, credibility, the right to respect, and the legitimate to hold formal right to make demands on others. Oftentimes people have added to French and Ravens, but you can also see how they can break them down into two different areas. One's personal, one's positional. So personal, the referent, the expert power. People also tend to include information power. It's what you know how to do, and then connection to power and who you know. Where on positional power, we have legitimate, reward, coercive, and then the added piece is resource power, so controlling access to resources. I also wanted to include in here, I'm running out of time, which kind of makes me nervous because I only have 15 minutes. So Lencioni wrote about 5 dysfunctions of a team. And these include, these lead to group dysfunction, if you will. Absence of trust, so an unwillingness to be vulnerable within the group. A fear of conflict, so seeking some sort of artificial harmony over constructive, passionate debate. Lack of commitment, that is feigning buy-in for group decisions, that tends to create ambiguity. Avoidance of accountability. Nobody wants to step up and be accountable for something, and that tends to set low standards. And then inattention to results. So we got it done, we can go on. So people tend to focus on personal success and not success of the team. So something that many people know are different group dysfunctions. People know and have heard about groupthink, which is by Irving Janis. The idea that once you're in a group, the group is swayed, or the group feels like they are impermeable to others. They feel like they're making the best decision, and there aren't any other ways to look at it. The Abilene Paradox, which I invite you to read. It's a very short 1 or 2 page. I think it's just a 1 page that's posted in our articles for the Trifocal Lens. And then group hijacking. And I will have to record group hijackings. This is what I did my dissertation work on. And it is definitely group dysfunction that I did a grounded theory study on to identify what group hijacking is. All right, so I'm signing off here. Peace to you, and I'll see you back in the organismic lens recording.